Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. All right, we are here with the second installment of our conversations on the different methods within each of the categories of fertility awareness. So this week we are discussing sympto-hormonal methods, and we have three different methods that we're discussing. We're discussing Marquette, FEMM, and Boston Cross-Check. And on that, let's get started. All right, everyone. I am so excited for this episode. This is one of our series of the different method types of fertility awareness-based methods that you would use for NFP. And this is our episode on sympto-hormonal methods. And a sympto-hormonal method is, in a basic sense, a method that uses urinary hormone metabolites and symptoms to open and close the fertile window. And we're going to get a little bit more detail into that for each of the different methods that we have on this conversation today. So I want to introduce, we have Teresa Sullivan, who is an instructor in the Marquette method. We have Christina Valenzuela, who is an instructor in the Boston Cross-Check method. And we have Ulrika, oh no, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Drevnock.
Drevnock. We have Ulrika Drevnock, who is an instructor in the FEMM method. Ladies, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Ellen. It's a pleasure.
Oh my gosh. And this is such a fun episode. I've never done it with so many guests, and I'm just so jazzed for this. This is awesome. All right. So I'm going to start with Teresa. Teresa, can you just kind of give us an overview of the specific method that you teach, which is Marquette?
Absolutely. So I teach the Marquette method, and the Marquette method, a lot of people know pretty well for being a hormonal method. A lot of people kind of associate it with the Clear Blue monitor, which is true. But as you mentioned, it is a sympto-hormonal method. So we actually have the flexibility of being able to use the Clear Blue fertility monitor, as well as cervical mucus, as well as temperature, and then other urine tests to test LH, progesterone, things like that, utilizing all of those together to identify the fertile window. So essentially, a couple might choose to only use the Clear Blue monitor as their only biomarker, or they could add on any of those other options as well, which makes it really flexible to really allow the couple to use it in whatever way serves their needs best. And it's used really wonderfully for couples who are trying to conceive, for couples who are trying to avoid. And we have a particularly large group of clients that use this method who are postpartum and breastfeeding, as it is really objective. And the woman can essentially look at the hormones in her urine and see what her hormonal levels are, rather than feeling the pressure of needing to distinguish what her mucus might look like, which may not be as consistent during that breastfeeding period. So we're really flexible. We can really cater to all the different fertility stages in life. So that's kind of a basic overview.
That's awesome. And I think I hear that a lot, that women switch to a sympto-hormonal method postpartum because of the objectivity of measuring the hormones, which makes a lot of sense to me. I personally have never used a sympto-hormonal method, so I know very little. And Teresa, in the Marquette method, the monitoring the hormones is the primary sign, correct? You can't use the Marquette method without measuring hormones.
Actually, the Marquette method was initially created as a mucus-only method in the 1990s, which is very little known fact. It was created by some researchers who were actually previous Creighton instructors. So it really is heavily mucus-based initially. We had not quite as an intense scale as the Creighton method for people who are familiar with that, but it was very mucus-based. And then as this Clear Blue monitor came out and monitoring urinary metabolites became a thing, I think it was towards the end of the 1990s, these researchers kind of picked this up and said, hey, this is really cool. Maybe we could incorporate this into our family planning method. So it did kind of evolve as that really made it stand out from the other methods. And I think the researchers really kind of dived into that aspect of monitoring the fertile window and kind of ran with it because it ended up being very effective and successful. So yes, I would say that probably 90% of the clients do use either the Clear Blue monitor or some other form of urinary hormone measurement. But it's not necessarily, it's not absolutely necessary to do that. They could use our mucus protocols only and add temperature or just use mucus. I will say our efficacy ratings are based on use of the monitor.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. Awesome. Thank you so much, Teresa. Yeah. Ulrika, I'm going to pass the ball over to you. Can you give us an introduction to FEMM?
Yeah, so FEMM is a sympto-hormonal method that was founded in 2012 and now has teachers in 33 countries worldwide, in addition to the trained medical provider network that we have as well. And FEMM teachers really provide, health and fertility education, basic anatomy and physiology. We teach ovulation as a sign of health. We teach about cycle variations and, of course, understanding and managing fertility. So FEMM uses cervical mucus and LH testing to identify the fertile window. And for us, we really call it the point of change is when, your fertile window will open. And that's really based on a cervical mucus biomarker observation. But then we quickly start adding in LH testing in order to determine when the LH surge is identified. And then we close the fertile window based on whether either the LH +4 has occurred or peak +3 has occurred. Whichever is longer is the close of the fertile window.
Sure. Wow. Okay, that makes sense. Now, again, I'm going to ask all these questions because I've never used Sympto-Hormonal method, and that's the goal of this episode. So going back to you, Teresa, is that the way that the Marquette method opens the fertile window? Is it opened by cervical mucus and then closed by either what the monitor or the LH strips are saying, or is it closed by cervical mucus? What is kind of that difference?
So there are actually 3 different ways that the fertile window can be open with Marquette. If a client is using mucus, that's something that we kind of establish when we do our sessions. Is this something that you're interested in monitoring in addition to the monitor? If they are not doing mucus monitoring, they just completely ignore it. And if that's the case, if they are using mucus, then yes, the fertile window would open with a fertile mucus sign. However, if they're just using the monitor, there are still 2 ways the fertile window can open. One is per protocol, which is something we teach our clients on a certain day of the cycle. Your fertile window may open based on, how long you've been charting, what kind of data we have on your cycles, whether you're a new user or an advanced user. Well, the instructor will essentially give you a day that your fertile window opens. And then the second way that it can open through the monitor is once a client gets a high reading on the monitor. So a little bit of background, the Clear Blue fertility monitor, which is the one that we have studied with the Marquette method, will give 3 different readings of hormone levels. It will give a low for low hormones detected in the urine. It will give a high, which actually looks at estrogen. Estrogen is the hormone that creates the cervical fluid. So it really is just an additional or a different way of monitoring that same aspect of fertility. Sure. And then it will give you a peak reading, which is the same as a peak LH reading, similar to what Eureka was talking about. So if the monitor happens to give you a high reading prior to your protocol start date, that would be an additional way that the fertile window is opened.
Okay, that makes sense. And that is a little bit different between the 2. So that's very interesting. Awesome. Okay, thank you guys. Christina, I am going to now pass the ball over to you. Can you give us an introduction to Boston Crosscheck?
Sure. Yeah. Boston Crosscheck is I love the method. I think I would call it it's like a symptothermal hormonal method. If we could just give it the full.
You almost don't fit into this category, but we put you here anyway.
Yeah. I think so. Originally, Boston Crosscheck started as a really robust, a Doring Roetzer symptothermal back in the late 70s. So it's been around for a long time. And then with the advent of kind of at-home hormone monitoring and with Marquette's research, we then integrated that approach to what I think was a very robust approach to symptothermal charting in the first place. And so it really has this core identity where fluid and temperatures and monitor are taught to every single client, and they're all weighted equally. So you could call it maybe a triple check method, but even that misrepresents it a little bit because you don't have to use all three. So all clients are going to learn how to observe all three, but as long as you have two of any of the indicators, you have enough for a cross check. So it could be a double check, it could be a triple check, however you want to use the method. And so that's really how Boston cross check functions with the different signs.
Sure. So that's a little different, that you could use a mucus hormone method, you could use a temperature hormone, or you could use a temperature mucus, which would be like a symptothermal.
Right.
Very cool. That's awesome. All right, let's talk quickly about charting. What are the options available for charting? So some methods require paper only. Some have a specific app for their method. Some are, it's based on the instructor, what apps the instructor is willing to work with. So we'll just kind of go in that same order. Teresa, what is the kind of charting options for Marquette?
So I would say that charting options really are based on a decision between the instructor and the client. We don't really demand anything specifically. Certain instructors might have strong preferences for the way that they like to read their clients' charts. Certain clients might say, hey, this is what I've been doing for 15 years and I'm not about to change it. It's working well for me. And we certainly want to honor that. So myself, what I do is I will give a client if a client is a brand new Marquette user, I will give them the chart. And the way that I do charting is I have a Google spreadsheet that's been specifically developed and catered towards the Marquette method. And I will give them that spreadsheet. And the really cool thing is that they can either utilize that via their drive and do all their charting on their phone or on their computer, or they can print that out and do it on paper. And I'm really happy to meet the clients with wherever they're at. And I would say that all instructors probably share that sentiment because we really, at the end of the day, want the client to be most successful. So if paper charting, having that chart right next to their bedstand or in their bathroom where they do their tests is what's going to help them, be most successful, then that's totally fine. As long as they have a way of sharing their charts with us, either sending it virtually via email, taking a picture of it with their phone, whatever works is totally fine. I also do have some clients that really prefer to use apps. And in some cases, I will be totally fine with that. As an instructor, it is easier for me to look at the chart that I recognize well, especially when looking at patterns over several cycles. However, if I have what I call more of an advanced user who really, is not in the learning stage, who's kind of autonomous with their charting, knows what they're doing, knows how to utilize an app well, I 100% support them using that. And I do have my preferences for apps that I recommend. And so I kind of just say, hey, if you want to use an app, this is my preference, and I'm happy to teach you how to work with it in a way that makes it easy for you and easy for me so that we can work together to really observe what's going on and be able to utilize this in an easy way for both of us.
Awesome. Very cool. And Ulrika, what is the charting method or options for FEMM?
Yeah, so FEMM, generally we recommend that a new client would paper chart for at least 3 months, just to 3 months / 3 cycles, let's say. So 3 cycles of paper charting, just to get used to, some of the coding and some of the features that go along with the paper chart. But then FEMM does have its own app that's available on the Apple Store or the Android Store, and is available for use. It's a free download, actually. It's a really nice looking app. It's quite, it appeals, I would say, to young users as well. So teen users generally quite like using the FEMM app, but so do adult female users. And but FEMM is great because it can also be used. I have some clients who chart with the ChartNeo app, and that app is a very secure app. It has a lot of back-end security that's enabled on it, and that app is able to be shared with providers in real time. The FEMM app doesn't have that capability just yet, but the FEMM app is great for sharing results. It's super easy to take a screenshot or to download results and email them in a PDF. So the FEMM app does have those capabilities. And so, I would say most of my clients have done their 3 cycles of charting and then on paper, and then almost exclusively everyone switches over either to the FEMM app or I do have some clients that have started using the Chartneo app.
Awesome. Cool. Lots of options. And Christina, for Boston Crosscheck.
Yeah, Boston Crosscheck, we do have our own special paper charts. If clients are open to using paper charts, we do really like to get them trained on paper because of the manual interpretation aspect. It's just so important to be able to actually get your hands on something and to not have to work around what an app may be trying to tell you about your fertility. But there are people who just really like to work with apps, and we're very flexible and accommodating to that. I would say one thing that we're really excited about is Read Your Body. I'm not sponsored by Read Your Body at all, but Read Your Body has been working very hard with many providers and methods, and they're actually working on trying to put together customized templates for various methods. And so Boston Crosscheck has been working closely with them. And so that is the app that I tend to recommend because it is so customizable. But, if we have clients who want to work on Kindara or OvuView or whatever the other popular apps are, there are just modifications you need to make to those apps in order to do them with Boston Crosscheck. And so we'll have our restrictions about if you're going to do Kindara, okay, but you can't do this, or this, and you have to add these things in. But we're equipped to walk through and help people set it up correctly. So we won't turn somebody away if they're not using a specific app or a specific paper chart.
Very true. I think across the board, instructors probably would say, well, I like paper charts. But users would say, I like charting online. Just because as an instructor, being able to look at the paper chart, it's very easy. That's what all instructors are trained on. They're trained on like hundreds and hundreds of paper charts. And so that's what's easiest to interpret quickly and, ensure that the user is interpreting their charts correctly. But, pretty much across the board, people and instructors understand paper's the way of the past. And we're moving forward. Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. So I want to jump into kind of what is the learning process? What is the class process like? So some methods have group classes, some have one-on-one instruction, some have a mixture of both. And then in addition, what I'd like you guys to touch on is kind of what is the basic follow-up that is offered. Some methods kind of have a lifetime of, quick chart checks, not necessarily like real in-depth follow-up. Some have, 3 months of follow-up, 6 months of follow-up included, and then additional follow-up at, nominal prices. So you don't need to speak specific prices, obviously, those change all the time. But just the basic class and learning and then follow-up process from that. So Teresa with Marquette, I'm going to have you start again. We're just going to go in the same order.
Sure. So the great thing about Marquette is we really have the autonomy to be very flexible as instructors in what way we want to serve our clients and what way they need. You get some people who are switching over to Marquette from another NFP method. This isn't their first rodeo. They've been doing this for 2, 10, 15, 20 years, and they're just switching methods. So they need a little bit less coaching because they kind of have the basics of cycles down and what charting means and what it means to abstain during your fertile window, things like that. So some people don't need their hands held as much. Others certainly do, because this is the first time that they've ever needed to practice NFP or they're in a situation where they're sexually active and avoiding or achieving pregnancy is their goal. So initially with every client, no matter what their background is, we will do an intro session. If they're new to Marquette, they will get a session that is between an hour to an hour and a half. And every instructor does this differently. Some instructors do only group classes. And, some people teach in person and at parishes or things like that. I would say, particularly because of COVID and just kind of the way the world is going, most of our classes are virtual, which is super convenient for both the teachers and the clients. You can learn in the peace and quiet of your own home after kids go to sleep. And I can teach in the peace and quiet of my own home when my kid goes to sleep. So it's wonderful. So you can do group classes. And I will say, I can't speak to the way other instructors do this, because again, we do have the freedom to be very autonomous, but the way that I teach and the group that I work with teaches, which is Whole Mission, What we do is we'll teach our intro session, whether that is group or individual. And then we will have several follow-up sessions. And those may or may not be formal. So let's just go down the road of an individual session first. Individual session, if they are doing this for marriage prep, we do have specific requirements. So if someone is, if a couple is engaged and their diocese requires that they have a marriage prep certification for practicing NFP and learning the method, we will have that intro session. We'll do a specific follow-up session after one cycle of charting. And then we will do a third follow-up session after 3 or 4 additional sets of charting. And then the way that my group does it is we are available to that client pretty much unlimitedly for a year. And so what that means is they can always send us their charts for questions. We're always available via email. I'm open to my clients if they need like an emergency session or something, like, hey, can you meet this week? Like, I don't know what's going on. Like an email just won't explain it. Depending on my schedule, I'm happy to meet with them. But essentially, the client has access to us for a year with the purchase of their session. Now, if the client did a group class, it's actually almost exactly the same. The only difference is that first session is with a group of maybe 4 or 5 other couples. And then all the follow-up and instruction is still individual. Now, that's just the way that we do it with my group. And then after that year is completed, if the client chooses to continue, then they pay another price per year, which is, of course, much less since you're not doing the initial teaching and you're just kind of there for maintenance. Now, if a client is breastfeeding, we will do a lot more follow-ups because things are rapidly changing and at different paces for everybody. Every day, things are rapidly changing and you don't know what speed they're going to go. You're getting on a ride and you have no idea what it is. You're blindfolded.
Yep.
So, what that looks like is you do your initial session where they'll learn the basics of the entire Marquette method. And then they'll also learn specifically how to operate with breastfeeding. And then what I personally do is I do a follow-up after another month of charting. And then I do a follow-up with every phase of fertility change. So what that means is, they'll chart and learn how to do our protocol for when they're in lactational amenorrhea. And then as their cycle starts returning and they might, find out that they ovulated for the first time, we'll do a follow-up there. We'll teach them what it looks like when your cycles start returning. We'll do a follow-up when they start stabilizing because we have several phases of our protocol for the return to fertility. And my preference is just keeping it very simple, teaching them what they need to know at the time. Because,
Sure.
you get somebody 6 or 8 weeks postpartum and they're just trying to get dressed in the morning. They don't want to learn what they need to do 6 months down the road. So we talk about what they need to know now. And then, we meet up again in a couple of months as needed whenever they need those follow-ups. So in terms of pricing, that's the way my group does it. However, I know that several other instructors might have ways of teaching a client an initial class and the cost might be cheaper up front and then they pay for each follow-up as needed because some people, again, might feel very autonomous with it. Other teachers might have different tiers of subscription to their services or things like that. And that's really where the beauty comes of each instructor being so different is you can kind of look to see what they offer and what their plan looks like essentially. And compare and contrast, like what's going to work best for you and your lifestyle, what your needs are, how much hand-holding you need. Because again, certain clients might need more support than others. So sorry, that was so long-winded.
Oh, no, that was great. So much good info. So just to kind of sum that up, Marquette basically has like a first class or session. And then there are kind of follow-ups from there to ensure, understanding and those follow-ups are always one-on-one. The class might be group or it could be one-on-one. And then it just kind of goes from there, sort of based on the relationship,
Yes.
and depending on the instructor. And something I do want to mention for anyone listening is that don't be afraid to ask a potential instructor these questions of, what does the class look like? How are you charging these things? Instructors are happy to share that information with you. They don't want you to come in and then be all confused and be like, oh, wait, I didn't know I had to pay for each follow-up. Don't be afraid to ask those questions and just ensure that you really do understand like what is, the basic layout of the class that you're about to take. All right. So Ulrika, oh my goodness, sorry. With FEMM, what is the kind of general class teaching and follow-up structure?
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo what Teresa said in the sense that once, like FEMM instructors, there is a lot of variability about what they might be offering in terms of packages and that sort of thing. But in general, the sessions can be done in a group or solo or just with a couple. And there are 3 main sessions that are taught. Now I'm talking for adult learners here. So those 3 sessions are called FEMM in Your Health, FEMM Expert, and then FEMM Family Planning. And then in between teaching, each of those would be taught like 3 to 4 weeks apart or so. And there would be a chart review in between each one. So that could be done either with a quick call or perhaps with the client submitting their chart and then with some individualized email feedback. And then after that, in general, I like to do a couple of follow-ups after those 3 sessions. That's about 5 hours of material in those 3 sessions. And then, after that, I like to have a couple of follow-ups just to, answer any questions, ensure some understanding. And and then, after we see patterns starting to develop after 3 or 4 cycles, it's nice to be able to chat about that as well, versus when we only have 1 cycle's worth of data. Again, like as we've all learned in these COVID times, it's beautiful that we've all become a little bit more normalized with meeting online. And so FEMM can certainly be taught in person, but primarily, so far, I've only been a FEMM instructor during COVID, so I've only taught online so far. And it works super, super well that way.
Yeah, thank goodness for Zoom. That's how we're recording this episode. So
no kidding.
I couldn't imagine like a 4-way phone call. I think we'd be like talking all over each other.
Yeah, you need some body language feedback, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Thank you. Christina with Boston Crosscheck, what's the general class session and follow-up?
So Boston Crosscheck, I think, is distinct from the other 2 that we've been talking about because we do have standardized class structures and fees that all instructors are basically expected to follow. So Boston Crosscheck is exclusively a one-on-one delivered method. We used to do group sessions when we were kind of in person in the Diocese of Boston, but really we exclusively work one-on-one at this point with couples. And we have 3 different classes. So just to get the structure in your head, we have what we call the method instructional program, which is just, let's learn the basics of how Boston Crosscheck works, right? That's where you learn all 3 of the indicators and how they work in conjunction with each other, et cetera, et cetera. And we also have a postpartum class and a perimenopause class. So those 2 charting scenarios, the kind of irregular charting scenarios, have separate classes. And so anybody who comes into Boston Crosscheck could pick up straight with the method instructional program. That's where you're going to start if you're an engaged couple and you just want to learn. Mm-hmm. And then later on, when it would become pertinent, you could take the postpartum class, or you could do it the other way around. You could come in as a postpartum client, right? Get through postpartum, and then you would head into the method instructional. So the order of taking the classes may vary based on the couple, but the structure is generally the same. For the method instructional program, it consists of 4 sessions, and they're spread out actually over the course of a full year. So when you hire a Boston Crosscheck instructor, you will get unlimited support through at least 12 cycles of charting. Because we work with the Doring rule, and you really need a full 12 cycles in order to implement our algorithm for start of fertility. And so the first session, you'll have your introduction. After you've got at least 1 full chart, we'll do session 2. And then about 3 to 4 months later, we'll do session 3. And then at the 1-year mark, we do session 4. And you have unlimited access to an instructor during that time. And we can modify the timelines a little bit. Like if you are getting married, you really need to get through session 3. I typically tend to do like 1 quick little check-in the week before the wedding to make sure that you understand the honeymoon chart, So we do have a little bit of flexibility in kind of the timing of the sessions, but the general structure, the framework stays the same and is consistent from instructor to instructor. And so Boston Crosscheck has a very standardized model for education.
Very cool. Awesome. Such good info, guys. Thank you so much. So one thing I want to touch on is single women who want to learn to chart, and just kind of how that is handled. Because for I think across the board, couples, it's pretty obvious to see just in the discussion that we've had how that's handled. But if a single woman were to come to you and wanted to learn to chart, how would that basically be handled? So Teresa with Marquette.
So I've had several women who I've coached through this who are single and just wanting to chart for health, which is just like always so cool. I'm like, you know what? Like you are giving your future self the biggest gift by getting on this right now. Like it's wonderful. I wish more women would do that. It's really wonderful. So, I would say that they would probably be served best working with an instructor individually, because, particularly learning the method based off of what their particular needs are. Oftentimes I do find that the women who decide to do this are those that might be cued into something actually being a little bit abnormal in their charting or in their cycles. And that kind of cues them into saying like, hey, maybe I should actually learn this stuff before the time comes for me to utilize this as family planning, which is wonderful, foresight on their part. So I will say that, they're usually best served when doing this individually. And we essentially will go through the same intro session because, a huge part of our education, kind of like Ulrika was saying, is just teaching about human fertility and their cycle and teaching about ovulation. And, in order to understand how to or how not to have a baby, you need to understand what's going on with your body. So I would say that, the majority of our first session focuses on the woman's reproductive system. And so, really, they're going to get the same information that they would if she was part of a couple getting instruction for NFP. We just might not focus quite as much on the rules for how to achieve or avoid a pregnancy if they're not sexually active. So what we really focus on is, these are the features of a healthy cycle. And, if we see these are signs to me that this may not be a healthy cycle, or these are the things that we want to look out for. And so I would say, in our first session, we're going to go over, the same general session. And then our follow-up sessions are going to say like, okay, like, how does this look? Like, does this look healthy? Does this look like, we might need to, get a little bit more data? Is this something that I'm suggesting you go see a physician for? Is there something that we might be able to just do some, we can't necessarily, even though we're medical professionals, we don't give medical advice, but there are things that we can suggest. I refer a lot of people to like Dr. Jolene Brighton and her book Beyond the Pill. I refer a lot of people to other great resources like Lara Bryden and all those who have really great, well-researched data for ways that you can naturally optimize your cycle. And those are things that a lot of single women find that they're really interested in doing right now while they have time. So I will say, I mostly like working on those women one-on-one with those women one-on-one. I have had some women that will show up to my group class, which is definitely geared more towards the family planning aspect, and they're single. And that's cool too, because at the end of the day, I think it's wonderful to really know, what your future holds if your call is marriage and if you're going to be utilizing NFP. So I think that that's really great to just kind of know what that's about, because yes, NFP is something that, you're going to be using when you're married, but like how great it is if you really understand it. And I think that it teaches you so much about your dignity if you really learn that even before you're married and even before you're in a relationship. I think it can be a real gift to yourself, your future spouse.
Definitely. Yeah. It's like, as a single woman who's not sexually active, like there wouldn't be necessarily a reason to need to know all the rules of opening and closing the fertile window. But there's nothing wrong with learning that.
Right. Exactly. And, I will say that a lot of people, when they get into marriage prep, they depending on what their basic knowledge of NFP is, they might walk into their first session thinking, oh, we'll only need to abstain for 6 days of the cycle. And that's the expectation. And we all know, unfortunately, that's not the reality. And it does tend to be longer than that. If a couple is trying to, it would be, if a couple is trying to avoid a pregnancy, it's going to be, potentially twice that long, if not more, depending on your scenario. And so I think having that realistic expectation, giving that expectation to your fiance, can really help with people as they walk through this, so that they're not too scared when they get told that. So
very true. Very true. Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. Ulrika with FEMM.
Yeah. So the beautiful thing about FEMM is that it does have a whole teen education system that goes along with it that I'm actually not trained in, but many of the teachers are trained in, and it's sort of 6 mini sessions is the way it's broken down. So for young charters, young single charters, that's an amazing resource to have. And yeah, and those FEMM teachers that do teach teen FEMM can be found on femhealth.org, the main website for FEMM. But yeah, for other single adults, it's like generally I've had some clients who have just told me like, I'm not interested in learning the family planning course, like the family planning class. I just want to learn the first two, and I just want to be charting for my health. And yeah, like just to echo what Teresa said again, I mean, it's like as a nurse to have, when I see clients who are just really wanting to create that data set for themselves and that health record that they could then present to another provider and say like, here, these are the patterns I'm seeing, or these are the changes that I'm seeing. I know there's something that's off with this. Of course, yeah, like Teresa said, we don't provide any sort of diagnoses, but we can at least identify some patterns in their charting. So, I mean, what an amazing form of self-care to take a few minutes each night to make a few observations on what you've seen that day. I just really think it's an amazing thing for a single person to be doing. It's such a good way to take care of your health. So yeah, that's so there's Teen Femme, and then yeah, some clients may choose not to do the full 3 classes. They might only want to focus on those first 2 classes, but yeah, like Femme is a great resource for creating a data set for yourself.
Absolutely. Awesome. That is so cool that FEMM has an entire track just like set up for teens. That's beautiful. And I hope in the future, like all methods will create a track like that to be able to teach teens and young adults how to chart their cycle before they're looking to do it for family planning purposes. That's awesome. Yeah. All right, Christina with Boston Crosscheck.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the standardized nature of Boston Crosscheck, it really is, I mean, its identity is a natural family planning system for fertility management. And so our standard course structures really are built for couples, right? We have components about dealing with abstinence, and we have components about church teaching, which are kind of built into the method instructional program itself. However, all of the instructors are very happy to welcome single women into the conversation, whether they want it to be an investment in future family planning knowledge, or whether they just want to come to kind of take control of an aspect of their lives and to delve into some issues on their own. And so what we would do in that case is we would just say, okay, well, some of these things you can file away for later. We may touch the tip of the iceberg right now if you're interested, but if not, we'll put them aside, and we can always come back to this if you want to at a later point. And so what we'll do is we'll switch up the language, and instead of talking about identifying the end of a fertile window, what we'll talk about is let's identify, how do we verify ovulation as a healthy sign, right? What we're really looking for the end of the fertile window is, has ovulation occurred? And right. Why is that so important? And why are you, as a single woman, why do you want to know that ovulation is happening? And so as Teresa and Ulrika have both said, that it can be very empowering for single women to learn this about what their bodies are doing, and can just be a great way to dive into questions that you have about your body, because so many of us do. And then just personally, I guess I can give a plug. It's not an official Boston Crosscheck thing, but I do have a teen charting system. And before that, I do have a cycle education system for girls that are both based on my training as a Boston Crosscheck instructor, but obviously are not proprietary to Boston Crosscheck as such, but do kind of belong in that same family, because I think all methods, everybody's nodding. I see Ulrika nodding. I see Teresa nodding. We're all saying like, girls should know this, right? So I think all of us have a real heart for educating women and girls for this as something that's an investment in self-knowledge. So everybody's welcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just for anyone listening, links to, connecting with these ladies and links to Christina's programs that she has, and then links to these specific methods and their main websites are all going to be in the show notes. So don't feel like you have to go start Googling things right now. You can just click on those. All right, ladies. The last question that I want to ask before we kind of wrap this up is I want to talk about kind of medical management, medical referrals, and just kind of how that's connected with your method. So I'm not really going to give you a question. I'm just going to leave it sort of open-ended like that. Teresa with Marquette, can you speak on the medical side?
Absolutely. So with the Marquette method, it is actually a requirement that every instructor has a medical background. I would say many of us are registered nurses, and then we have several or numerous physicians as well. So I would say nurses and physicians are the primary educators. When you sign up for a class, you'll see that your teacher is certainly going to be a medical professional in some capacity. We also have physician assistants. We have pharmacists. So anybody with some sort of advanced, or an advanced practice medical degree or any kind of medical background can teach. So you already kind of go into it knowing that your teacher has this medical background and has the ability to kind of sense things. So we've been taught this from the beginning. This is part of our profession. So that kind of sets us up for even learning to be an instructor on a different playing field, I feel. So that's really great. And then we also have, in terms of referring people onward, what I might do is if I have a client who I sense might have a higher medical need or issues going on that I'm no longer fit to serve, what I will do is often refer them to either a nephro physician or a FEMM physician. And anybody who really practices restorative reproductive medicine should be qualified to look at those charts. Now, you sometimes will get particular doctors who do prefer certain methods of charting over the others. So if somebody has Marquette charts, they want to make sure that whatever physician or provider they go see is going to be open to looking at their Marquette charts and not be limited to looking at charts of a specific method. So I will say that's one thing. Another thing is that I might also even hand off a client to another instructor who might be a physician, or I might just kind of ask that physician, like, hey, like, this is my client's charts. This is kind of what I see and what I'm sensing from the training that I've been given. Is there anything additional that you might provide instruction wise? Additionally, as instructors, we are required to take 3 different courses. First is the core course. The second is the teacher training. And everybody who is a Marquette instructor certainly has completed both. Now, there's an optional 3rd course for Marquette instructors called medical management. And what that is it is an entire separate course for specific instruction on dealing with anything extra, essentially, besides the family planning aspect. So, dealing with any issues that might be causing hormonal disturbances, subfertility, hypothalamic amenorrhea, PCOS, endometriosis, identifying specifics to all of these conditions within the chart. Now, this is an optional course, so not all instructors have taken it. I'm in the process of auditing it myself. In order to complete it for certification, you actually have to be an advanced practice provider. So what that means is for somebody to complete this course, you have to either be a nurse practitioner or a physician. I'm not sure if PAs are qualified to complete that course or not. But essentially I'm auditing the course now, but as I'm in nurse practitioner school right now, I will still get my certification for that whenever I complete school. So I'm kind of doing them both at the same time. And again, we're not attached to a specific medical model, but we do refer people to restorative reproductive physicians when we see indication for that in their charts.
Awesome. Okay. That is such good info. It's like, all I knew was like, well, they're medical professionals. That's about it. Thank you so much, Teresa. Ulrika, can you speak to FEMM's medical side?
Yeah, so we have a protocol within FEMM that if we see 2 abnormal cycles in a row or 3 within the course of a year, we highly recommend that the client move forward and be referred to medical management because, just for those indicators, we think it's important that they be seen by a provider. But yeah, like Teresa said, and I'm sure Christina will agree as well, depending on what's available locally or via telemedicine, really any physician that practices from a restorative reproductive perspective will be able to offer advice. But yes, there is a specific FEMM medical management training that is offered, and many physicians around the world have taken it. Locally, there are none for me to refer to. So I refer to a physician who is both NAPRO trained and has also been trained in the ChartNeo medical management system. So yeah, that's why I have a couple of clients who end up charting with the ChartNeo app, just because it has that capability of being able to be shared to multiple providers at once in real time. So that's a really nice feature, because I can see what's happening in the chart. The physician can see what's happening in the chart, and it's just really useful in that way. But yeah, so that's what FEMM does for medical management.
Right. And there's like a system, FEMM Health, I believe is what it's called, or what did you call it? That of like these doctors who are trained specifically or physicians in like FEMM.
Yes. So yeah, there is a FEMM medical management course. It's we are paired with something called the Reproductive Health Research Institute, which was founded by Dr. Pilar Vigil. And so she is really at the core of all of the medical protocols that FEMM has developed for its medical management training for physicians and nurse practitioners.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you. All right, Christina with Boston Crosscheck.
Yeah, so Boston Crosscheck does not directly have any medical management right now. And all of our instructors, we don't have to have a healthcare background. We go through extensive training, doing natural family planning work, during which we are trained to identify things on charts which may lead to necessary referrals, right? So what we do is we're very upfront with clients, and we say, look, we're not healthcare instructors. We cannot provide diagnoses. We cannot prescribe you anything. However, we are able to coach you through your charts. And so if we identify certain things on charts, deficient luteal phases or really delayed temperature shifts or anything, what we will do is we'll have a couple options. One would be to sit down with the couple and to say, these are the things that we think we're seeing on the chart. At that point, we could refer them to an instructor in a method that does have direct medical management. So we could refer them to say, I think maybe you might want to consider switching methods and picking up charting with Creighton or, a FEMM, or even Marquette with a medical management person. Or what we can do is we can kind of coach them through, here are some questions that you could ask your doctor. Do you have a good relationship with your doctor right now? We have some local people, because Boston has been hyper local, like Boston Crosscheck has been hyper local for so long. We do have our local network of people that we can say, this is somebody we trust you can take your chart to. Clients around the country and around the world will have different options. But we can kind of say, here are some questions you could ask your physician. Here are some things that you could ask them to do testing on for you, and just kind of inquire to see if they'd be able to help you out with this. But we can't offer anything direct at this time. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, ladies, this was so informative for me. I don't even know if any of the listeners are informed, but I am, so that's good. I want to just quickly touch back on each one of you before we wrap up. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about your method or NFP or charting or anything along those lines? So we'll start with Teresa, if there was anything else you want to mention.
I honestly can't think of anything. I feel like we talked on the methods pretty well, and just particularly focusing on the beauty of focusing on the hormones, which is I think very unique to our set of methods, and it really sets us apart. I would say that we all really are grateful for the objectivity of our methods, and there's a reason we choose them. We think that they're wonderful tools and options. And of course, we understand that not every method is for everybody, but I think that Sympto-Hormonal is a very special set of family planning and fertility monitoring, and really provides great options to women and couples who want to kind of get that additional, more scientific type objective look at what's going on with their hormones on a daily basis. So
absolutely. Yeah. I hear that word a lot when talking about sympto-hormonal methods is like, oh, I really like the objectiveness, of looking at this monitor or looking at these test strips. Like, that really resonates with certain types of users. And it also can resonate really well with certain users in specific time periods. We kind of talked about postpartum. A lot of people choose to switch to a sympto-hormonal method because the protocols are just kind of a little bit more straightforward and more objective. Again, that word.
Yeah. And one thing I will say, and I know you've probably touched on this in some of your other podcasts, but the great thing about like NFP in general and also sympto-hormonal methods is you are not limited to a specific method for your whole life.
Yes.
And sympto-hormonal can be a really awesome method that people might choose to just use in one season of life. Some people might say like, hey, you know what, like symptothermal or, a mucus method might work really great for me in every other reproductive stage. But for this particular stage, I might want to do a sympto-hormonal method, or, as my years are progressing and my cycles are becoming less predictable, I think that, maybe I want to add some more objectivity because my normal signs aren't there. And that's the great thing about NFP is, you can utilize any of these methods at any time of your reproductive lifestyle, and you're not limited to them for any defined period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Ulrika, was there anything else you wanted to mention before we close out?
I mean, I think it's just incredible. Like the range of choices that we have available to us is really just goes to the fact that fertility awareness really promotes women making informed choices about their healthcare and about their bodies, and how much it increases body literacy to learn something like this. And I just think it's such a gift that we have this available to us, and that all this research and scientific work has been done to standardize these methods and to provide us with these amazing tools that we can use to learn more about our bodies and to help us in our relationships. It's a real gift. So I'm so glad to be a FEMM instructor and fertility awareness instructor, and I love this area so much.
Awesome. Fantastic. And Christina with Boston Crosscheck, anything else?
Yeah, I think I'll just say, I think one of the things that scares people away from a sympto-hormonal method, specifically maybe the monitor methods, is the cost, right? I don't want to invest in a monitor, or if I need a temp drop or whatever, the ongoing test sticks. And so I think we're very sensitive to that. Like, yes, these methods can sometimes be more costly than some other methods, but instructors are very generous in general. Like, if there's financial considerations, we can offer like sliding fee scales. There are creative ways to save money on test sticks, to save money on your monitor purchases. And there are even networks, I would say, growing networks of people who really want to support others using these methods. And so don't be afraid to talk to your instructor. Don't be afraid to ask people what they've done for cost-saving measures, because these things do exist and it can make the method a lot more affordable. So I would say, if you're really interested, if you would love the idea of a sympto-hormonal method, specifically with the monitor, don't let the cost alone scare you. There are creative things that you can do, and people who are willing to support you in making that decision. So that's what I would say in closing.
Absolutely. Oh, that's such a good point. Thank you so much for speaking on that. Cause yeah, I do hear that of like, well, that's the expensive method, Marquette's the expensive method. FEMM's the expensive method, but yes, there are like, just talk to people, open up about this. People are happy to share. They want to help. And yeah, I like the word creative. There are creative ways, to save money on methods like this. Well, ladies, thank you so much. This has been such a fruitful conversation. I am so excited to share this with the Charting Toward Intimacy listeners. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, this is one episode in a series of episodes discussing the different method type categories of fertility awareness methods. And so this week we discussed sympto-hormonal methods. Last week we discussed mucus only methods. Next week, we're going to discuss symptothermal methods. And the week after that, we're going to have an episode about discerning what is the right method for you. So if you're listening real time with us as these are being released, don't miss out on next week and the following week's episodes. If you're listening after these have already been released, be sure to check out the rest of the episodes in this series, because this series is put together for you to be able to get as much information as you can to be able to make the best decision on what fertility awareness-based method you should select to use with natural family planning. Until next time.